Millennial women are more educated than their male counterparts and more confident than any other generation of women. So why is it still so tough for them to climb the corporate ladder? PricewaterhouseCoopers chairman and senior partner Bob Moritz joins me now with more. Bob, thanks very much for being here.
Happy to be here.
So you guys recently did a study that looked at this issue, millennial women in particular, and it found that 51% of women said they would be able to reach the senior levels at their current employer. 61% of men said the same thing. Even though they're making all of these gains, why is there this gap?
Well, I think you've got a gap for two reasons. One is the environment that they're operating in. And again, it's the responsibility of corporates to create the right environment for women to be successful and deal with the challenges or opportunities that they want to pursue, which are in fact different than men, when you think about being perhaps the primary caretaker, for example. Second, you've got behavioral issues where, again, opportunities like Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In book talks more about the behavior for women to want those opportunities, as evidenced by the survey report that you just came out with.
Now, you were recently at the White House talking about work-life balance as part of a summit there. In this survey, you find that men and women essentially both view work-life balance as a really important priority, but I feel like this conversation always happens in the context of women. We're always talking about women and their work-life balance. How do you bring men into that conversation? Yeah,
men are equally interested in it. And just to step back, our next generation study showed that about 70% of the next-gen millennials will actually put a higher value on flexibility or choice in terms of where they work, how, when, why, etc. It's not that much different. It's about 62% for baby boomers. Now, then you can slice it and say from a women's perspective, there's a perception that it's more, but there's an increasing opportunity for men to want the same things. So now the question becomes, how do you get it? So in order to be successful, in order to do these things, organizations have really got to step back and say, how can I actually leverage, for example, technology to create part-time job share, work at home, etc., whatever the individual choices may be. And that's what next gens really want, is the choice to control their own destiny.
So let's talk about PricewaterhouseCoopers for a second. How do you guys put this into play at your company, create some kind of flexibility that doesn't also end up kind of mommy tracking women so that they never reach those senior levels?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that happen here at PwC. One, it is a tone at the top issue. So our entire leadership team is ingrained in this, talking about this, and hopefully exemplifying this, because you got to look up and see it happening. Second, we are enabling the organization to support a number of people to do this. Flexibility is not an I sport, it's a team sport. And we've actually done creative things like set up flexibility contests where the team will support one another to actually get the flexibility they want. And last question, we've actually set it up where we want white males to be part of this process. They've got to be successful. This is a two-way conversation. So we actually have programs like White Men as Diversity Champions to actually help with this exercise to make sure the environment's correct, the support's there, and the flexibility is an option for people.
Now, one of the big concerns is it's easier to achieve flexibility if you're, say, an employee at PricewaterhouseCoopers, if you're one of these higher level employees. But if you're a woman who's working at McDonald's and you're earning minimum wage, flexibility is just kind of a pipe dream for someone like you. So that's where we get into talking about kind of government benefits. Right. And so I'm curious, having just been at the White House, what's your take? Do you think it's time for the U.S. to have a policy where required paid maternity and paternity leave is the law?
Yeah, so if you look at the U.S. and its competitiveness right now, we're not at the par that we need to be relevant to some of these benefits that you're talking about. And I do think there's an opportunity for the business community and government to work together to talk about things like, what do you do around sick pay? What do you do about maternity and paternity leave? What do you do around flexibility options? What do you do about minimum wage? That was the conversation that we had last week with the White House and some of the actions that we were debating. The question obviously is, politically, can you get some of this stuff done? And the interim, maybe the better thing to do is to demonstrate organizations that are doing that well and talk about the benefits that come from that. Because as we all know, if you've got those better benefits, people are more likely to be engaged. If they're more engaged, they're more productive. They're more productive, it's a better bottom line and better for the country overall.
Okay, I have to ask, because female executives get asked this question all the time. Men almost never do. We were chatting earlier that you have 2 kids. How do you reach this balance between your work and your personal life? What does it take?
Yeah, to me, it's sort of 3 things. Number one, it's got to be a priority for you. You've got to make the choice in terms of what's important and not, and you've got to speak your mind about that. Second, you've got to ask for help. The reality is, I was not able to do the things I was able to do. I was a single dad going through a divorce, so I had to go through that same exercise in terms of taking care of kids, picking them up at home, doing the homework, etc. But you got to ask for help. And then third, you've really got to make sure that at the end of the day, the organization knows that you're doing these things, because you don't want it to be sort of, out of sight, out of mind. You want to be representative as a role model. And this way, the more you talk about it, the more support you're going to get. The more support you get, the more ability you are to actually achieve this stuff.
All right, Bob Moritz, we're going to leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us.
Happy to be here.